So Krzysztof is a long-time employee at VirtusLab. So he works there, well, I don't even know how long, longer than me, and I don't remember how long I worked there, but around forever.
14 years? Yeah, around forever, yes.
Well, more or less. Probably one of the first handful of employees, right? Or yeah, something like that.
They said it's founding engineer, but
All right,
I haven't found anything, so.
So he started as an engineer, and now he's leading not one, but two departments. One responsible for Scala professional services, as well as a significant chunk of development of Scala compiler. And he also had the other one, the other department, which is tooling/developer experience, which would be especially interesting for the in the context of the presentation that he will be doing today. His presentation, which is developer tooling, the universal foundation of productivity. And in this presentation, he will tell us some foundational principles underlying development productivity. And interestingly enough, he will cover both human engineering aspects as well as the aspects related to AI agents in this respect. So, without further ado, I think the stage is yours.
So, hello everybody. Welcome to my talk. It's, I need to read this. Developer tooling, the universal foundation of productivity. And oh boy, what I did to myself. Why I put such a complicated title? So before we start, I think we need to sort of dig down what I want to talk about. So let's start with something that is probably this, maybe not the simplest, but something that is the core of today's meeting. That will be developer productivity. And how many of you here know what is developer productivity? Like, show your hands. Okay, I'm not going to show mine. Because for me, developer productivity is a bit like happiness. Like, do you feel happy sometimes? I hope so. Can you know that you are happy? Most likely so. Do you know how to measure how happy you are? I don't. Do you know how to make others happy? Sometimes, somewhere. Of course, there are people that tell you, drink 5 glasses of water each morning and run for I don't know how long and meditate and you'll be happy. That's most likely bullshit. But the same with developer productivity. It's not a thing that is a universal, not a thing that we can say, oh, I'm doing this and I will be productive. And developer productivity to be useful it was said today multiple times, it's basically about how to measure and what kind of outcomes do you want to get from it. And the thing is that, how to measure productivity, oh boy, that's a science. And I really, I have huge respects to people that actually try to do this. So I'm not going to talk about this because I'm not in their league. And with the outcomes, because being productive for different companies, for different projects means something else. Somebody wants to move fast, somebody wants to be, really stable, somebody wants to just care about money. So basically, productivity is a game of bespoke outcomes. So things that are unique to a given situation. And do you see my problem? Because I said universal foundation. So what I can do here? And for that, I need to share you a bit of a probably embarrassing story. But when the DX movement was starting, and I was doing a lot of tooling development back then, and I sort of read some news, read some articles, it was like, wow, finally somebody will tell that what I'm doing is really important and everybody will love us and we will get the big rises and everything. And I was reading more and more and more and I was disappointed. Because I was expecting things like, oh, use this programming language, use this tool, use this process, whatever. And it was all about measures and surveys. And I was like, what's going on? And I was battling hard in my mind. I know I will find a solution for this because I'm doing it for ages. Of course, I haven't because those people were smart and surveys and measures is the way to go. But this, where I actually start thinking differently about not what we can do, so what is the way to go, what is the solutions, but what are about fundamentals. And I was thinking, what is the universal things that we have around here on Earth? That's physics. We cannot find physics. But there is one more that we built as a civilization that is huge, that is universal human rights. And it's not applied everywhere as much as we want, but come on, 100 years ago it was not a thing. So it's a huge that we got this and this applies in some places. And this gets me to the universality I want to talk. So let me show you this. It's Magna Carta Liberatum. I don't know how many of you know what it is, but it's basically an act that was enacted in like England in 13th century, where it basically starts of like civil liberty in England. And why I picked this? Because there's other probably better, but this one's probably not that much affected by, Christian politics. And of course it wasn't right because it only grants rights to some of the people, like nobility and clergy and stuff like that. But still, it was in medieval Europe. So guys, this was really big. And things like My Home is My Castle was actually started there on this. And I want to take you to sort of a journey from here. And imagine something happened, something bad. I don't know, new agents. We cut our salaries by 5%, or the Food Fridays are being cut off from our teams. And we all developers rebel. And there was huge fighting. And finally we are in this stage that we try to reconcile with managers, people that think only about money and platforms and stuff like that. And what I think in this presentation is okay, we are at the part where we try to figure out what is the fundamental right of developers. Let's build it today. But so what are the things that should come to your mind when you're thinking about that? So basically, I cannot tell for everybody from my experience, but I can read reports. And for example, JetBrains, when they were doing a surveys about developers and what they think, the top thing that was said that our documentation is bad. So the first right should be our documentation should be good. Or another the research that was doing around the DevOps movement showed that the teams that have actual involvement in writing requirements, gathering feedback from business, those projects with significant. The data shows that those projects were much more successful. So that should be right. We as a developer should influence how the system should look like. Or we should add more focus time. Okay, there's way too many things. And this is the moment when actually Pavel did it, but I need to mention who am I and what I can do. So basically I'm a guy that was working on tooling. And I'm doing that for quite a many years, and right now I'm probably overexposed to bad tooling. Because what I'm doing, I'm managing many teams that tries to help clients and people that actually screw up really big. And this is kind of a point of view that I want to take you today. So basically from this picture, I'm this guy, this one in the back, that actually adds a small piece in this document. And what we will focus on today is the universal foundation of productivity in terms of what are the rights of us as developers, what we should have, and I can say more, what our agents and other AI incarnation that we will have in our code should have. Because if you think about this, those products, entities, whatever you want to call it, are sort of a bit like a lens. They need even more than what we do, and they need to do it faster. So let me get you to that journey. And I will start with a bit of cliché. Sorry for that. Is there anyone here that sees this for the first time? This is XKCD? I was expecting that. Sorry for that, guys, but I'm too emotionally attached to this picture. Mainly because by the time I see it for the first time, I was actually working on optimization compilation process. So I was the guy that was trying to sort of break this kind of fun things. The problem, or maybe not the problem, or another coincidence was that we literally have such a foam source in our office, and we're literally spending, maybe not with chess, that was too dangerous, we tried it, but it was literally our sort of playtime. So, but what I want to optimize and what I want to talk about is something I call the loop. So the process of getting the code to be run to see if it works. It's really hard to define. That's probably the best definition I can get, because depending what kind of technology do you use, it can be compilation, it can be transpilation, running tests, running applications. But that's the fundamental part. That's where the software is being made. And here, I want to say that this should not take more than a minute. for all the people that are developing here, is your compilation, is like this loop, that the time when you get your code tested or run takes more than a minute at this very moment? You know where to find me, I will try to help. But the number, this minute, is a number that I should give 3 years ago. Because the number I should give you right now is a second. And why is that? Not because of us. Minute for humans is okay. We can stay still for up to the minute or maybe more and wait for the results. And basically we code slowly, so a minute here isn't that big of a thing. But our artificial friends, oh boy, they like to go fast and they like to iterate. So basically if you have from them, let's say they want to run the code and see if the results of their work, so some kind of agent, if that takes a minute, that's basically that's a key that's killing their productivity. Because at this very stage of the technology, and I don't know if it will improve or not, they need those tools need to iterate a lot. So basically the numbers I got from people actually working on that agents, like what is the number of the sort of loop that should give you to be productive for those tools is around a second. So let me just formulate, and I forgot an anecdote about this. So one of the projects that we were doing, we were like sort of in proper state. The sort of our loop was around a minute or maybe two, and we tried to optimize, build processes. That was quite interesting, and really for the people in that team, that sort of was really like one of the most interesting projects that we were doing. And then, as one of the subtasks, there was this thing that we need to analyze some kind of calls, and we need to write some like JVM agent or something like this. So technology was boring, the task was boring, somebody and my friend got this task. And after, it was back the time when we were still working in the office all the time. And after some time I realized one thing, that guy is super happy doing that. What's going on? Like the technology is crappy. The thing is not that interesting. He just needs to analyze some calls that is quite boring, but he's super happy. Why? Because his feedback loop was under the second. And when we spoke, it was really one of the few times in his career that he was super productive. Back then, he was doing C++ and so forth, so long compilation was a normal thing for him. But this, iterating within a second of all that and everything, that feels like a superpower. So if you haven't tried it, try it. It's amazing. So the rights that we want to formulate would be something like, let it be decreed that the cycle of development shall... sorry, guys, I will not tell that. So basically, a development loop should take at most seconds in most of the cases. So let's move on. What should be our second right as developers? Fruit Fridays or whatever? No. For me, it should be developer environment. And this is sort of it correlates a bit to what other Krzysztof was saying with the platform engineering. Maybe on a bit lower level, but we should provide the developers with a stable foundation, stable tooling, and stable environment to work. I'm not talking about chairs and monitors. I'm talking about tools they need to do the job. IDEs, compilers, databases. And you can go further. You can go about Kubernetes and deployments, but in many cases, people don't have a stable IDE, which is a problem that we as an industry should solve 20 years ago. And setting it up, how fast it is, how stable it is, how nice it is important. But there is one probably mostly overlooked aspect of that, and that is trust. I was in one of these kind of disaster cases that we need to solve. There was a huge problem with the IDEs that they were using. Basically, it breaks every few hours, giving you a random things. The compilation that you trigger from them was not running on the actual code. And we actually fixed it, but the problem was that after we fixed it, we observed behaviors that developers still, as a maniacs, they still try to sort of clear the caches and restart the IDEs for every kind of problems they do not understand, even though everything was stable at this point. Why is that? Because developers lose the trust in their tools. And if you lose the trust, you blame or everything that's going on the tool, not on your code. And you will spend a lot of, the numbers that it's 10%, that you calculated before on the platform engineering, imagine that developer actually, to do something that takes 30 minutes, spends 3 hours cleaning the IDEs. How much waste is that?
It's not in just 15%. It's not in there.
Yes, it's another thing. So yeah, so the amount of money that we waste was one of the many approaches. But this, and what do we tell developers? We have a complex with the managers. We have this complex system that our developers need to work on, and what they have in reality, broken tooling. So the second thing that I should say that we all should have, and it is sort of not civilized to expose developer to a situation like this, is that when the environment is not stable and easy to set up and is not trustworthy. Because if you don't trust your tools, it's really hard to go because we're so dependent on tools. And that's probably at some point will involve all the agents, AI and LLM stuff. Because as Steve says, this, what we are observing right now, it's the same thing as compilers. All this hardcore, assembly programmers, engineers, when the compilers were introduced, no, there is no way I can trust on their program to write the code for me. I need to see the registers. I think it's the same at the top moment of the time. And speaking about AI and agents, can you imagine agents that you give a task that when their environment fails for them, or the sort of the output they got will be lying for them? It was, I think Steve put it nicely, that that you will ask it to implement something and they will come back with a seagull or something in their mouths because they were chasing problems that they were not their own. So we as humans, we can adapt, we have a taste, and we can basically live with the problems. I don't know how well it will apply to the bots and agents that we will have in the future or have it right now. And most of the agents right now require something like, oh, I need to have a Docker image with all the developer environment set up. So basically, introducing agents to your systems might actually solve the problem for you. And then we're going for another aspect, CI. I hope that is there anybody here that doesn't have a CI in your project? That's because that would be a barbaric, literally barbaric. And but it's not only to have a CI. It's not only that CIs actually run stuff, but there's few things about CI called useful. I don't know if this is a proper word or not, but what I mean by that. First of all, you need to understand what the CI is doing, and you see the value in it. You can imagine how demotivated and untrusted developers are, where the CI and the failures are completely, they don't see a value with it. I was working the project 1 or 2 that basically have, we need to regenerate some files to keep the shape of the tree because somebody needs to see if something changes. And probably for that people and that person that is important, but 95% of developers working with it hated that. And basically this adds tons of unnecessary charge because people were pushing changes that works locally and they fail on the CI because you forgot to run something. But let's move forward because that's one thing. The other thing is, probably the most favorite word for a lot of people that are doing the developer productivity thing, that is flakiness. Do you have flaky tests? Yes, so CI should not have flaky tests. And if you have, really tomorrow morning, talk to your managers, to try to cleanse them as much as possible. That's early productivity killers. And that's productivity killers for us that we know that they might be flaky. Imagine we have an agent in the loop. And you ask him, let's add this on, handle. You have an application that, calculates some numbers, so let's change the algorithm. And you see the changes it produces and actually change all of the tests because all of them were failing for random reasons. So yeah, and I was a part a few times or action that takes a lot of resources to cleanse flaky tests. And people were doing, there was drastic measures. In one project we have this that whenever the flaky test was detected, all of the PRs was paused before the problem was analyzed and somebody was put the task to fix this flaky test. I mean, it was a bit restricted at some time because it was causing actual problems in the production, but in a year or two, the amount of flaky tests go pretty much to zero. And finally, developers stop blaming others for their own failures on the CI because they broke some other system. And the last bit that is about this usefulness of the CI is how well it scales. Because if there is one thing that I'm pretty sure what AI will change in programming, it's how much code will be created. And I think something like triple, quadruple, or even more code being generated each day by the same teams will be something normal. Not because their code will be 3 times better, but we get lazy. And if something else can write the code for us, that will be long. Like, how many of you, when you generate some code, really care how many lines of the code or how big that code is? Only some people. Good for you guys. But in most cases, it's not the case. And the time when they realize they generate megabytes of source files on the CI is when the CI actually becoming slow. And what I see here is that our CIs with with LLMs and everything producing tons of code for us. And also, again, when we have agents that iterate, they will run a lot of the CI, those CIs needs to be fast. Do you reuse results between runs on your CI? Do you not run all the tests all the time? You should. Because I think it's for some bigger projects, they're already running. The CI costs a lot because CIs, it's not like it's scaled with at least quadratic compared to the team size rather than linear. But I think even more. And with more people, more agents, more things producing code in a loop, then the scaling will be a big problem. So CI should bring value to each developer, and it should be fast and scale well. Oh boy, my favorite one. Who is waiting on code review right now? On somebody else? Oh, I probably should also ask who's writing code or but this is a big thing because from what I see, this is the biggest blocker in all of the projects that I was working on. Most, or in some cases, the code's waiting on the review, and especially when the team is trained with producing a small changes that are ironically easy to review. Most of the time, these changes that was implemented will be those people will wait on the code review stage. And with more code, because I think, as I said, I think this is a constant, or almost something that will happen, there will be even more queues and waitings. Would you trust your agents to do the code reviews for you?
Just kidding.
It depends, but let's say, even if you can trust half of the code, your agents to review that, you will get 5 times more code to review. So code review will be a big blocker. And the code review is actually, you can do it right. And the thing is that small teams and the big teams are doing it, huge teams are actually doing it right. Small teams, because there's only a few people and you can literally go to your friend, either on Slack and kick them to do these 3 reviews for you. And in the big teams, there is no way they can operate without proper procedures. But having a code review that is able to do, and that you will get code review within a reasonable amount of time, is, and for sure would be, something that would be necessary for all the teams. And the last bit, that's a bit related, and I get a feeling that it's super overlooked in many ways, is ownership and support. Do you, in your organization, at this very moment, have a way or have a means, technical or procedural or others, to know who to ask about the problem, if it's coming from a different system? Are you incentivized to do it? I don't see hands. And for me, you should. I try to basically, whenever we do evaluation of how many few junior engineers that we still have in our teams, and not only juniors, this is a really important metric for us. How often that person asks for help? Because we sort of, especially, with our cultural cycle, asking for help is sort of a show of weakness. And we don't want to do it. And even more, asking for something for introverted is hard. So if we don't have a culture or mechanism or anything to actually to limit that barrier, we will suffer. And often you find out that, talking to somebody can solve the problem in 3 minutes and give you an idea for 3 new things, rather than spending weeks, even with help from tools like LLMs. So yeah. And the next thing is support, because not only you should ask for help, you should basically require help from others. And I see teams where actually pretty much each team needs to have something like L3 supports for other teams. And that is painful for developers. But then I ask those people, hey, do you want to live in a system when you don't have that? And everybody says, oh, I see, that's fine, let's do that. So that's the last thing, that each developer should know where to look and how to look for help about each part of the system. And I probably overlook many things, because this is sort of not really a scientific thing. It's more like a story and the feeling I've got over years working with the teams. But if I want to write my part of sort of a manifesto, of like Magna Carta for developers, I would put these 5 things in there. Thank you.
Time for questions.
Wondering how it's feasible to compile Scala code base in 1 second, and especially in IntelliJ.
I can tell you, maybe 1 second is probably, for Scala, it might be probably too fast, then we won't be able to do it, but 3 or 5 is feasible. And we have, in one of the projects that we're working on, the average compilation of the code base of multiple million lines of code actually gets to the level of seconds with proper caching. So it's like, it's proprietary build tool that was built there, but I think with tools like Bazel, you are able to get to the seconds even with Scala.
But not with SBT. So.
We can take SBT question out of this and talk over beer.
Let's to know what to compile, right? You don't want to compile it.
Yes, small targets, because the problem is not only the compilation stuff around the compilation, and also if you compile too much and if you don't reuse the targets. But that's sort of a technical solution to a problem. I can talk about all night, so don't tempt me.
Just a continuation of previous question. So it also is kind of kidding, but compilation is fine for like 1 or 5 or 10 seconds, but also you will have some code checks, style checks, whatever. And for example, for my project, for more or less 11 lines of code, it takes 5 minutes just for Go compilation plus all of these special checks. Probably can't be anymore.
Do you know the secret? You don't need to run them of all of the changes. So that's the problem that can be solved. You just need, the problem is that management needs to know that they should invest in that. And most likely that things are overlooked.
I'd like to comment about the first point specifically. So the first 4 are important, but when these 4 things go bad, they usually go bad gradually. You can notice that your feedback loop is longer, that your CI becomes less stable, and there is usually time to fix that. But the first point, when it breaks, it is usually a disaster. So yeah, it is kind of common sense that when you're stuck, when you don't know what to do, how to proceed, go ask your manager, go ask your team lead, go ask an expert, go ask somebody that works on a project for a long time. But I have seen projects where there is literally nobody to ask. The knowledge is lost because the whole team quit, or the only expert died of old age. The documentation has been lost, literally lost. I'm not making that up. There was a big book, paper book with documentation, and it has been lost. This is a real story. So I would like to point out that this first point is probably, it may look like unimportant, but when it breaks, it always happens suddenly. So you should pay attention. You all should pay attention to that.
You mean the being able to ask somebody? Because I'm not sure what is the first point which you were referring.
I don't know how to do that, but the manager should pay attention to the state of knowledge that is kept in the project. Yes.
I just wanted to add that the description the gentleman on my right said is exactly the COBOL modernization that Krzysztof is a fanatic of. So I'm hoping for a larger history.
But about the COBOL, I get a feeling that in many years, all of the programmers, as we know it right now, will feel like COBOL. So most likely, whatever language and technology we are doing right now, we are doing COBOL. which means we will earn a lot of money.
There is a silver lining.
All right. So, any other question? Okay. Thank you very much for your talk. It resonates with my developer scars very much. However, I'm just wondering whether the manifesto that you presented isn't a little bit too revolutionary or radical. So I came across an anonymous company, let's call it Company X, that has applies a principle of 80-20. So basically, the principle that says that do as much as is required to get a good enough outcome. So it means when I come to an executive of that company and say every single team in the company must get to seconds in the development loop, or that there are no flaky tests whatsoever, and probably some other, they will say, come on, well, the important thing is to be good enough and everyone will be happy. So I'm wondering, what would you say to the executives of such a company?
I mean, remember that I set the stage that we were after the revolution, so, it's a time to talk about this. But this is a serious question. So I am actually pushing a bit an envelope here, because probably for most people, unless there's really, the leadership is really open to being such bold. But, I'm pretty sure that 95% of us will not get 1 second development loop with current setups and current teams. What I want to sort of with this manifesto, I don't know if I know it should be manifesto, maybe I should put it as a manifesto somewhere, is actually so we start paying attention to all this. So we start talking, communicating, and changing the things around. Because, maybe you have this 10% off. Or if you don't have, if you are blocked by somebody on the review, or I don't know, you don't know how to ask for help, which means you have a lot of slack time. Use it to improve. I cannot give you a silver lining because I'm not pretending to be, some kind of coach or something. And each, solution for each problem is different. But if you just put yourself as a task and start speaking to people about this, you will find solutions how to do it. All you need to just to have a right motivation and right inspiration. And you need to know that you can do this. Oh, sounds like a coach. Come on.
Yeah, and I think there is, it could be also read, this manifesto, as sort of aspirational, right? And I guess there is probably this thing, like with Dorametric, that is diminishing returns. Going from 50 minutes and building CI to 5 minutes is far more beneficial than from 5 minutes to, say, 5 seconds, right? Or something like that.
Each order of magnitude change is good. So I would say going from 5 minutes to 5 seconds is much better than going from, 10 minutes to 7. Because that doesn't change that much. Because there's things like, level of attentions, what you can do. And changing 20 seconds to 30 seconds to 20 seconds doesn't give you that much. But changing 10 seconds to 1 second, oh boy, that's a change. Because you will be focused, you will be most likely to wait for this to happen, and you will not lose a lot of the context.
So quite contrary, no diminishing returns.
It's not the simple question, not the simple answer, sorry. But yeah, there is a diminishing returns, but also changing of the level of magnitude can mean much more than just simple numbers.
Any other questions before?
Really quick, I liked your question about how do you convince executives. Krzysztof is trying to, have a revolution here, which is awesome. But if we combine this Krzysztof's talk with a previous one where he taught us techniques to use financial arguments to convince executives, then I think we're onto something. My experience is use the money.
Yes, actually, there is ways because with developer productivity, you can pretty much all the managers, please shut your ears, do not listen to what I'm going to tell you, but you can quite easily creative in the numbers. Because you say, oh, we are saving 3 hours, and the hour of developer cost X, and you get quite a big number. So, but what I learned is maybe you can use it as a rule of thumb. 1 person a year, I think is reasonable to improve performance in a team of 20 by around 5%. So if you go, if your scale is bigger than that, you get returns. It's a rule of thumb, but your mileage might vary. But I'm pretty sure in every team, you can actually get more productive. It's all about, as you said, combining money, maybe. I don't know what works for your managers. Because some managers like, I don't know, cuts. Show them cuts.
You said that they like money earlier, so.
Not all of the managers. The executives maybe, but managers?
I don't know, I thought that you said that earlier. So, next question.
One question referring to point number 4. What's the reason of having a code review?
Sorry, what is the reason?
What is the reason for having a code review?
Appointed father.
I mean, we mostly have code review. This is actually a really good question. You can drop it off. I mean, if you're working by yourself, you most likely do not do code review. And that works. But the literature, like when you look at this sort of blog posts about this and everything, they will tell you because it's improved the code quality. And I will say, maybe, because most of the code reviews that we get is change this verb in the method name, which brings pretty much no value in my opinion. But there are teams that actually do a proper code review. One of the tools that we are developing, code review process takes more time than developing the code because it will affect millions of users and they literally go and try to see if everything changes or not. That's probably an exception, notable one, but that's an exception. And I think why we have a code review, the answer is that why we are doing sort of any kind of peer reviews. Just to move the blame to the group and be more certain about our changes. So it was it was not only my change, somebody look at this. And there's also one more thing, people learn during the code review. So that's probably another aspect why we have code reviews, but I'm not saying that we need to have code reviews. And basically, if you read this right, so developer should have their change PR reviewed within the right people within the few days a day. If you have no review, that is checked.
Yeah, because there's a practice known for, I believe, like 30 years, which would limit this time to minutes or seconds. It's like per programming. So why wouldn't you change it into this simple practice?
Because, I mean, as I said, I didn't want to give you solutions. I just want to say around like what I expect to have, what I should expect not to have in the given teams. And basically, if the solution to the problem is actually do the pair programming all the time, then we are all good.
I think, by the way, one of the reasons people do, or companies do, code review is reducing loss factor, right? You are sort of forced to have other person who is, who knows the code at least a little bit.
So, Pavel, if I may, I want to say something.
Sure, go on. I don't think you have more questions, so I think it's about time.
So, I mean, we have this kind of event like this, first time here in Krakow. And the question is, people from here, are you interested in coming for more? Should we have a meetup for it? If we have a meetup for developer productivity, tooling and everything, who will show up? Okay, let's have one.
That was quick. Meetup has been founded. All right, thank you, Krzysztof.
Thank you, everybody.